G'day, Zach Kelly. Today I'm with Brady Gunn, the founder of A Stand in the Park. Mate, I've been looking forward to this meeting for a little while.
Me too.
So thanks for meeting with me and looking forward to your book launch tonight.
Yeah, should be good.
Mate, tell us, who is Brady Gunn? And tell us your story before all the nonsense, what's been happening since, and tell us how you come to, found Stand in the Park.
Yeah, it's a good question because A Stand in the Park, I talked about, at the very beginning I talked about A Stand in the Park being, my truth stood in that park. I didn't stand in that park, my truth did. And at the time I think a lot of people were sort of thinking that, the truth against the government, the truth against the pandemic, and we're standing for the truth, and that was true. But it was my intuition as well, and I'd spent a lot of time and effort after a pretty painful sort of childhood and pretty unhappy sort of adulthood, and that culminated in quite a sort of long depression there. I spent a lot of time and effort on just learning how to not think so much.
The stinking thinking.
Just the hamster wheel just going round and round and round of just speculation and expectation and judging everybody and judging yourself and meanings and labels, and it just goes round and round and round, and that was my depression basically. So the other book that I wrote was called The Art of Shhh, which was about my journey out of that depression and out of thinking. Yeah. And when you stop thinking so much, then the old pain gets a chance to come out of your body. Yeah. So it's not being labelled, and so it's not being perpetualised. Yeah. So I cried a lot for many years just getting the old pain out of my body. Yeah. And then when you're not sort of on the puppet strings of your old pain, then your intuition's running the show. And so my intuition went and stood in that park. So
how old were you when you sort of took responsibility of that and realised, I've got to stop this, this is just...
35.
35,
yeah.
Mate. Yeah, yeah.
And I reckon that's about an age for a lot of people is about the 35 where you've gone through what you needed to, and you did need to. Like I had to go through all of that to get here.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the stuff we question and see as not fair, and a lot of the stuff we see our kids go through and wish they weren't. We have to go through that. It's the way it's meant to happen.
And a lot of that stuff up to there, that's adopted stuff of we're just doing what we think we've been told to do, and it either serves us or it doesn't. And if we find it's not serving us, then we've got to proactively take control of it, how we want to move forward from that.
Yeah, and the only way to truly do that is to let it be there. Yeah. That was where I got to. I just stopped. The bear was chasing me, and I just stopped and I turned around and like, fucking whatever. Yeah. Whatever. Good and so the true responsibility is letting something be there. And some of that stuff that I really sort of was really depressed about was just utter nonsense. Yeah. Other was really, really impactful. Like some people watching, it's a really fucking horrific shit happened to them. Yeah. But regardless, you still just have to let it be there and take 100% personal responsibility for your reaction to it. Yes. And your interaction with it, and the bear, and just let it be there, and then let the pain be there. Yeah. Because when we're young, we're taught solve that maths problem. Yep. But don't touch the hot stove. Yeah. Figure that out, but avoid pain. Yeah. And when we get older, we try to do this with these really complex emotional issues. We should be doing the opposite. Yes. Should be going into the pain instead of we spend years of why that shouldn't have happened and who did that and how could you and all of this and try to solve it and make sense of why that man did that to her, whatever. Yeah, yeah. And run away from the pain with alcohol and drugs and bad relationships and everything.
Just to get away.
Whereas we should be not thinking and just letting the real pain, getting goosebumps of just and cry the fuck out of it and just get it. Don't label it. Yes. Don't call it I'm crying because of this reason. Yeah. If you start labeling it, then you'll start perpetualising it. Just find where the energy is stored in your body. Yes. and expel it. And it's an exorcism.
If you can't feel it, you can't heal it.
Exactly.
It's a part of that life.
Yeah. And then and I did that for 3 years. Just cried and cried and cried, just getting all that old pain out of my body. Yeah. And the thoughts were attached to that. So the thoughts of my loneliness were making me more lonely and perpetualising the feeling of loneliness. Yes. But when I just didn't call it was a Sunday afternoon and my friends were out and everyone had got a partner and I was this and that and the whole sort of thing. But when I didn't call it loneliness, it was just a feeling I used to call loneliness that was in my body. Yes. But without the label, it could expel itself. It's the label. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it becomes that figure eight where you get just in that infinite loop of Mark Twain had a saying, he said, I've lived 1,000 tragedies in my life, most of which never happened. Yeah. And that's where depression comes from, in that head of where we just keep recycling the same old garbage. Yeah. Sorry, keep going anyway.
Yeah. And that's why I wrote The Art of Shhh, is that I started just looking at so if I needed to stop thinking, then who was who here? If I'm going to take a good long hard look at myself, then who's looking at who? Yes. And if I'm not my thoughts, then who's not my thoughts? And who's my thoughts? And if I'm not the old pain and my intuition's something, that's almost like there was two separate things going on here. Yeah. So I started looking at my thoughts and I started watching the patterns of them. So I just started shushing thoughts that I didn't want to have, I'd go to judge someone and I'd literally just shush myself in my head. And in doing so, you shut down the neural pathways that are being injected with drugs. Like, I was totally addicted to my depression.
Yeah.
There's drugs, millions of drugs shooting around us all the time of just joy and depression. And
why was that, mate? Do you think that because it made you feel connected to something?
Oh, you're just a druggie on your own drugs, really.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, you're getting a fix, and so you've got these neural pathways that are just major. Anyone who's been depressed knows sometimes you wake up in the morning and everything's normal, and you remember that you're depressed, and all of a sudden whammo, and you crunch, and then the pillow comes over. Your neural pathways just start firing, and because they're so well worn, it's just like a beautiful big beaten track for drugs to shoot down, whereas the joy paths are shriveled up and grown over.
Yes.
And so when I started shushing, when I'd go to judge someone or I'd go to have a shit thought and I'd shush it, then I was slowly but surely shutting down those neural pathways.
Yes.
And then the joyous pathways have an opportunity to flourish.
And replace them with something more positive, something more supportive.
So it was actually really scientific, but I was just shushing in my own head.
That's a good point. Bright yellow, stand in the park. Did that have something to do with the new direction for you?
I don't know. I remember I came up with a stand in the park in just sort of one fell swoop one night after I'd been to a protest in Sydney at Homebush there, and it was just the colour for unity at the time, but it could have been anything like that.
Yeah. Was there one thing that you wanted to achieve with Stand in the Park? Like, what was the trigger that, like, this is what I want to create through this movement?
Connection.
Yeah.
I went to a protest in August 2020 in Homebush. I don't think I'd ever been to a protest before.
Yeah.
And we were all sort of like, just one day in February 2020 or whenever it was, the rug just got pulled out from under the world.
Yes.
And everyone we knew was different, the world was different, and we were just trying to figure out how to live in this new world that we'd landed in.
Yeah.
And so we were still falling at that stage. I think only some of it it's just only sort of starting to land now 4.5 years later. It was that sudden, and it was just stratospheric so instantly that it was
just ripped up from everyone. Yeah.
And so I remember going into that protest with sort of trepidation and just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. Yeah. And it was crazy, that one. It was just, it wasn't really organised and we couldn't, and so we ended up being chased around in circles on the oval. And I remember just thinking, what planet am I on here? Like, not even what country am I in? Yeah. What planet am I on? But after I left that, it was really confronting. It was even now, I was just so foreign, so alien to what I thought the world was and who I thought I was in it, and everybody and the authorities. But I remember walking away from it thinking, what a wasted opportunity. Yeah. There was only 200 or 300 people down there, but no one had shared any numbers, no one had shared any information, no one was a support for anyone. Yep. We'd just gone down there, got chased in circles by knuckle-dragging, overall-wearing bullfeds and left again. Yeah. Like, there's got to be a better way to do this sort of thing. And I didn't really sort of try to think of anything at that stage, but something was brewing, and just over a couple of days, I thought, if there was less centralised protests, yes, and we didn't call it a protest, then they couldn't focus all their resources on one protest. Yes. If it was a stand, then it would be a different intention. Yes. If it was on every Sunday from 10 to 11, then we'd know where to find each other. If the internet went down, we could find each other. There didn't have to be any leaders, so the leaders couldn't get targeted. Yes. We needed to have these physical energy exchanges because everybody was sharing online. Yes. We needed to be in the physical sharing that. It was far more potent and far more support. Yeah. And so I just thought of this whole sort of stand in the park thing. We'd wear yellow in unity. There'd be no leaders, no agenda, no religion. Yep. It would bring the groups together that was sort of fragmented at the time, which sort of come together now in the sort of 5Gers were over there, and the common lawers and the anti-vaxxers and the new anti-vaxxers. And there was a way of us all sort of coming together with no agenda. It was interesting you say that. So one thing I haven't told you is I ran as a federal candidate in when it was all the shit show was happening. Yeah. And I used to attend the stand in the parks. Now, the stand in the park was the very first public-based community group that I was made aware of, and it was like the first, which was I was doing a renovation at Cooper's Plains. It was just a godsend for me, just to get to rather confused for all of us. Go, what the hell is going on? Yeah. Let's have a civil conversation, and you could share some facts and figures. Going, you know what, I don't believe that. That's bullshit. But I do believe this. And you could just have this one-on-one dissemination, because we can all be keyboard warriors and not have to be held accountable for anything. But when you're talking to someone and say, I think this is real, you get a bit more discernment around it. But what I noticed with
the different stand in the park group, the diversity of what the subjects were that each community wanted to talk about.
Yeah, interesting.
There was no one thing. It
No.
was like, some wanted to talk about alien invasion, some wanted to talk about just the medical situation, what was happening, some wanted to talk about politics, it was just, some wanted to talk religion. It was like, so if you were hoping to create an open format, you certainly created that. You know.
Well, and I think it needed to happen like that. If I had have tried to lead, I always said I'm not the leader of Stand in the Park. Even when I was starting it, I said I'm not the leader. I'm going to go stand in the park for my personal truth and my freedom. If that's different than your truth, then that's fine. I'll be in the park. Come and stand. We'll stand together.
Yes.
And so I never professed to be the leader of a stand in the park, and I think that was an important part of the birth of it is me not trying to direct it or make it stand for anything. Just let it go and stand for freedom.
But how did you promote that? And how did you get it going? Because like, there's a lot of stand in the parks going. Like, what's the reach of it so far? What's it doing at the moment?
It's hard to tell because there was no real sort of structure to it, and there's no real money sort of funding it, and so it was, at its height, there was about 1,400 in about 30 countries. Yeah. We don't know if a lot of those are running or not. I don't even have any email records for a lot of them because I was just winging it. They just grew so quickly. So I think there's probably about 1,000 left. Yeah. Still really big in Europe, and they're in France and Canada and the States.
So how did you go about empowering the communities to set up their own? Like, you've gone from just your one that you were going to do, and then how did you go? Okay.
Well, it was on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Facebook's been a massive pain in the ass for all of us, but it also made all of this possible. Yeah, it was a real double-edged sword for them and for us. Yes. And so I just started sharing it on Facebook. Yeah. Yeah. And set it free. It wouldn't have started if it wasn't a thing. Yes. And so I think maybe the no leaders, no agenda thing and the opportunity to actually go and move your body and stand there with intention with other people who are like-minded with no expectation, and in a park probably helped as well. Yeah. If it was standing in a cafe, then people wouldn't have felt comfortable being in the cafe and trapped and stuff. The fact that it was in a park, I realised afterwards, was probably really valuable to it.
Interesting, yeah.
And so it just did its own thing. It was just a good idea at the right time, and I didn't really need to promote it at all. But the videos that I was doing was helping as well. Yes. I'd never done a live video Facebook thing before, ever in my life, before I'd just stand in the park the second week. Yeah. But I was kept doing them after that, and I think that really helped promote a stand in the park, because I was just saying what so many of us were thinking in a very real way, and so I think that probably helped a lot, actually.
I think one of the other things, mate, it's also created an avenue for, there's a lot of talk about potential lockdowns and all this sort of stuff, and blackouts and all this, and who knows what to believe. Yeah. There's now, someone knows at least, okay, 10 to 11 every Sunday at the park, that's a place they can go to if there is no communication. They've actually got a bit of a roadmap now to at least get them somewhere to go to. So I think it has a kick-on effect of that. Yeah. What have you learnt? What have you learned about human nature and society and yourself and people through the process? Because you've been in the ride for 4 years now?
Yeah, 4 years. It's a long time.
And it would have come at personal cost for you, mate,
Yeah. They put in jail and kicked out of Sydney and still listening to my calls. Yeah. So it was quite confronting in that sense. But
tell us about jail.
Oh, it's a horrible place.
Yeah.
But I just got thrown under the bus. I was also organising all of the big Sydney protests up until July 2021, which is apparently where the guy apparently punched the horse.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I was organising that until the point where they announced the lockdown. So I'm like, I'm not the organiser anymore. Yeah. It went ahead. I don't know how, but it still went ahead, and they knew that they had heavy suspicions that I helped it go ahead. Yeah. So less than a week later, I was in jail. And they gave me 24 hours to leave Sydney, and then there was 9 charges or whatever. Pretty much all of them were nonsense. Yeah. They just wanted me out of Sydney, just full-on political prisoner, and these cops are just judge, jury and executioner with these bail conditions these days. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have signed it if I wasn't leaving Sydney anyway, but they were bail conditions that a violent offender wouldn't have got. Yes. And
you weren't doing anything unreasonable other than just putting a platform for people to question the system.
Well, I was doing a few different things, and they had, so I was standing in the park had started, and that was a thorn in their side, and it was a worldwide thing, and so there would have been global meetings about this fucking stand in the park thing. Yes. And then the videos that I was doing was sort of getting a lot of coverage and saying some things that they probably didn't want me to say. And then the big Sydney protest as well. So they were flying drones over my house and following me around, listening to my calls, and I was public enemy number 1 at that stage. Yeah. And they just wanted me gone. Just. Yeah. Trying
to coerce you out of it.
But to answer the original question is, what are my thoughts on humanity afterwards? This is so much more good has come from this. So much more good for anybody who's taken responsibility for it and stood staunch in their truth, their personal truth. It's looked different for each of us. Yeah. We didn't all need to organise protests. Some of us have done way bigger and way smaller things, but with the intention of sort of standing staunch and not taking the vax or whatever. Yeah. So much more good has come from this. All of our best friends are from out of the Stand in the Park. Exactly. It's crystallised who we are, what's important to us, who other people are, what we're willing to give up for it. Yes. We've made all the best friends. It's been a brilliant thing. It's been a brilliant thing the last 4 years. Yeah.
And it's been a bridge between multiple groups as well.
Yeah, yeah. And we need to make sure that we continue to set aside the fact that we can't be responsible for third parties here. Yeah. Obviously, people who are listening thinking, well, it's pretty horrific. I mean, kids have died and all of this sort of axe injury stuff, but we can stand staunch in our truth, but we can't throw ourselves under their bus. Yes, correct. Whether it's directly by trying to sort of actually sort of take responsibility for them, or just emotionally by just getting really sad about what they did to themselves. Yes. Unfortunately, it's a sort of a cruel world, and they did that, and so we shouldn't be laying in bed at night losing sleep over what they did. It's fucking sad. We did our best. Yes. It's not our job to, it's our job to wake people up, not take responsibility for those who haven't. They can look like very similar things, but they're two very different intentions and two very, very different outcomes.
Like they say, they've got to participate in their own rescue. You know, yeah. They've got to be involved in that process. There's another saying that came up through the period that said, you know, and it was when I was trying to explain some stuff to people, I was saying, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. Yeah. You know, I can give you the information, how you disseminate that yourself as to what meaning you give to that.
Yeah. You can't open people's heads up and put what they need to know inside and close it back up and lock it up again. It's just impossible.
Well, I'm sort of at the opinion now that I think there's enough information out there openly that I don't think our job is to wake people up anymore. I think our job is to sit in our own truth, be the best versions of ourselves, turn up every day, and then when they're ready, keep an open door when they're ready, you know, no judgment, because we're all there at some stage.
Yeah, and it's important to hold that compassion, not only because that's what we need to be as human beings, and in this particular case as well, but also because what are these people guilty of? Trust and stupidity. Trust of people that we should be able to trust. Yes. And stupidity in doing what they did. It's not exactly the crime of the century, no matter how much they attacked us and no matter how stupid it freaking was in the face of such obviousness, but it's not the crime of the century. And so we need to stand on the side of this out of control freight train with open arms, waiting for them to jump off, because it will crash. Yes. I mean, this world, it will crash, but we need to be in our compassion with forgiveness for these people. We need the numbers for a start, but we also need to stay in that space.
Yes, cool. Yeah. Mate, before we quickly jump onto the book, where do you hope Stand in the Park goes from here? What's your aim?
I don't have any aim for it whatsoever. Yeah. I've just watched the whole thing with great joy. I mean, I've said it since the beginning, I didn't stand in the park. My truth stood in that park. I take full responsibility, I take full credit. Yes. For the hardest thing you'll ever do is learning how to not think and live in your intuition. Yes. But that's what started Stand in the Park. But that doesn't mean that I haven't really appreciated all the message that I've got and watched what it's done. And I mean, the best message is it saved so many lives to Stand in the Park and created so many. There's been babies and marriages and so many initiatives have started out of it. Yes. Stand in the Park was never going to be the thing that started it. It was just the safe space for them to create out of. Yes. So many initiatives started in a Stand in the Park. Yep. Been a brilliant thing. But for me to start sort of either trying to dictate or even speculate on behalf of what it might do would be against what it was born on, what it's grown on, and what am I going to do anyway? Yep. And like you said, so many Stand in the Parks are so different. They are different. And what's it got to do? Well, what have I got to do with fucking Newcastle upon Tyne in England? I mean, it would be silly for me to try to navigate it or direct it anyway.
I had a big learn within myself. There was a stage where I was very critical of some of the stands because they were going on subjects that they weren't my thing, you know, and it was like, hang on, I've got no right to do that because the community that was gathering, it was their thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? I need to respect the fact that it was that. So it was good in that learn for me as well.
And a lot of them got corrupted as well. I mean, it was the place where everybody was. So all the common lawers and the extremist religious and were going down there to try and sort of hijack it and navigate it and dictate it. And it was always going to happen. And that's why they were there, because that was where everybody was. Yeah. And so some of them really did disband because of it, and they really did a lot of damage. But again, they've got to figure that out for themselves. I can't fix it, and that's humanity. So that's them not figuring out their own community problems within their communities is the same problem as what we're having now, is that people don't want to get involved in politics.
It's actually democracy in action.
And you've got to have those hard conversations. In the past, if you're in a village, you just had to have it out with people. You couldn't avoid them. It had to be sorted out. You might have fucking hated that guy, but you still had to live together, and so you just did. Now, it's so easy to compartmentalise yourself by joining all the groups that think the way that you do on Facebook, burying yourself in technology, whereas before you used to have to sit out on the street and see the fuckwit across the road. The world's changed a lot, and we can really deny, or whatever the word is, avoid a lot of situations, which is creating this emotional and spiritual stuntedness, retardation in the truest sense of the word. We're not grown, full-bodied, whole, well-rounded, connected, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, people, and that's why sick people could have only done this to sick people. And so if society wasn't sick, then these sick people couldn't have done it. We were just like we did. We were like, well, fuck off. We're not sick. I've done the work, and so I didn't let it do them to me. But how sick do you have to be to let this happen to yourself and throw your kids under their own bus? But so we're not sick as a society anymore. This doesn't happen anymore.
Mate, I think by far a net good, and I'm grateful that you started the start of the thing. It got me started on my journey. I think it started a lot of people on their journeys as well, so I gave them a space. So although you maybe you were instrumental in starting it, and maybe you've given it the right rules to let it organically grow where it needs to grow in its own energy. So
it's been a brilliant thing.
Tell us about the new book. That's what we're here for today.
Going to do a book launch in Brizzy. Well, the Art of Shhh was written in 2012, and that was about sort of the more spiritual, I guess, stuff. Even though it's not a real spiritual book, it's more about just training yourself how to not think and get the pain out of your body. But Smiley Face Fatigues is what the book about a stand in the park's called. So I used to joke about how nuts is this, because we were all public enemy number one. We were getting so targeted by the police down there. They were coming down and really harassing people hard, and it was just so nuts. And I was saying in some of those videos, how nuts is this? We're public enemy number one, but who are we? There's a bunch of old ladies with Pomeranians, armed with Pomeranians, little kids wielding baby Cheetos, and we're standing there in a Smiley Face Fatigues, like we're public enemy number one. So the book's called Smiley Face Fatigues, is just sort of a piss take out of it. It's got a fairly big chunk of my life story up until that point. And then it's based off the videos that I was doing with a sort of a really factual narrative woven in. So I think it's a really good memoir. I think it's a really good history documentation, because all of those videos were sort of said in the moment, live, as it was unfolding. There's a real cruciality to sort of just to direct translations that a lot of them are. And then the factual commentary sort of punctuates it and just really outlines just how nuts that was. I mean, I read back on that and just think, wow, it was just quotes from the politicians. And so it's a really good book to just buy and keep, and it will probably almost be better in 20 years, because I'm already looking back on it and going, wow, wow. And all those videos could vaporise. I mean, you look at ancient Egypt, there's a better documentation of ancient fucking Egypt than there is of life as we know it now, because all of these microchips and videos and whatever is going to dissolve in about 100 years. So we need to make sure that we're documenting this, and a book that you can hold in your hand is a good way of doing it, about as good as it gets.
I was diving into legislation and that when I was going to the campaign, and I saw this legislation from New South Wales, which wasn't my thing, but it came on and it said that if you're flying a commercial flight from Melbourne to Brisbane, when you're over New South Wales territory in the cabin, you need to put a mask on while you're over it, but then once you're outside over the border, you're still in the same plane. It's like, anyway. And
there was arrests taking place from, there was one in particular, we went to court, they really hammered them hard. It was an old couple who'd flown to Perth, but the regulations or whatever had changed while they were in the air.
Unbelievable.
And so when they landed in the airport, they got busted for a whole heap of stuff, dragged through court. They were a really big deal. Because they changed when they were in the air. It was so nuts.
Unbelievable. And mate, with your book, have you offered any advice for moving forward, or you just really want to capture it as a memoir? Or?
It's captured as a memoir. I really have no idea what's about to happen. I do know that we're winning hardcore, and that we do win at the end of this. Well, and this is not a well-oiled machine of just solid, well-crystallised machinations. This is a whole bunch of really ego-driven morons who've been very entitled, who are trying to put together a world takeover, and they can't even organise like a pink bat scheme or a solar scheme. I mean, government initiatives are just shit always, but now they're trying to do this, please. And so they're not a brick wall of fortress of just people trying it on, and I think they're realising now just how small they actually are, and they're defending a lot of what they've already lost. They've already lost control of the financial system. They've already lost control of media. They've already lost control of you and me. They're defending what they had.
Yes.
This is why they're doing this. But this could look anything from, and I'm not religious, but this could look anything from Jesus Christ coming down out of the sky to a full-on alien invasion, to a fake alien invasion, to nothing at all, to the world waking up and I have no idea what's about to happen. No clue.
I think, the only way we control that is by what's going on internally in ourselves. Because if we're going to respond to everything external, we're not in control of our life.
Well, and if you really want to break down, if I wanted to break down according to my spirituality, then none of it's happening like we think it is anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Everything is only a reflection. Yeah. And so when we do take responsibility for ourselves and do the work on ourselves and become full, well-rounded, whole, physically, spiritually, emotionally people, then the world reflects that.
Yes.
And the action takes itself for a start, but the world is a reflection right now. What we see is happening in the world right now is simply a reflection of who we are as a whole. Yeah. So I agree, totally. And a lot of people are trying to save the world, but they haven't started saving themselves. Yeah. We need to save ourselves first and deal with our shit.
Jordan Peterson has a good point on that. Have you followed his stuff? Before you go and save your own, save the world, you know how to clean up your own room.
Yeah. And so many of us don't. Yeah. So many people don't. They just haven't gone there at all.
Yeah, I think that's our life journey, though, isn't it? We're in a state, we're a work in progress the whole way ourselves, all of us individually. None of us actually, I've arrived, I've got there.
No, and adversity has to bring it on. I mean, if adversity is one of the only things that unites for a start, you look at really poor countries, they're happy because they know who they are and they know what they've got and they know that people have got their backs. The more affluent countries are the ones that are killing themselves and fighting each other and arguing because they don't know who they are in that, and it creates competition, and there's a couple of different reasons, but adversity really unites, and adversity leads us to ourselves. We need adversity.
100% on that. I forget where I was. It was in the last couple of months, but I had a really good aha that the lady I was talking to, she said, what happens with humans when we're faced with a threatening challenge, like what you call adversity? We come together. We come together in floods. We come together in earthquakes. We always come together. A lot of people got the vax because they thought that was a cross. They were coming together, take one for the team. Yeah, and
they really played that.
But once they realise now that they've been lied to, once they realise that they'll come together, so we can just have faith that we'll all stand together again. We just don't point fingers at each other.
And a lot of people haven't quite faced the adversity they're about to face to force that out of them.
100%, that's true as well. Yeah. Mate, just in closing, if you were to, I don't sense that you're the sort of fellow that wants to give advice to people, but you've negotiated some tough times. You've dealt with a lot of people over the last few years. What advice would you give just to help people negotiate this next stage?
100% personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It's so easy to sit in the shoulds and shouldn'ts and they shouldn't be doing this and those people shouldn't have reacted like that, and there's a whole broadcast here that's going round and round and round. Yep. Forget about it. Just do what you can do, the best you can do it, and don't speculate on what it should be. Just do it. Follow your heart. Learn how to not think and feel instead of thinking. Yeah, awesome, brother. Well, look, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, looking forward to hearing you talk again tonight. It's cool today. So, thank you, everyone. Cheers. Please follow Brady. Name of the book. Where can they buy it? Smiley Face Fatigues. Standinthepark.org. And is the case? What was the last one? The Art of Shhh. Yeah, that's available on standinthepark.org or bradygunn.com. Yeah, awesome, mate. I'll put those links. I'll get those links. We'll put them on there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your week. See ya. So ask yourself this question. Will you stand